Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to review Wonka, which is a prequel to the 1971 classic Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory starring Gene Wilder. Was this prequel really necessary? Stay tuned and I'll give you my thoughts. Gene Wilder's performance of Wonka in the 1971 classic Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory will forever be legendary, so a prequel to such excellence piqued my interest. The movie starts off with an instrumental version of pure imagination. I love that we're starting the movie off strong with a nod to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Wonka is returning on a boat from a 7-year journey of researching chocolate. The only upbringing story we have so far is that Willy Wonka grew up on a riverboat with his mother. No real understanding as to why they lived on a riverboat, but she gave Willy a cocoa bean every day until he had enough on his birthday to make one whole chocolate bar. He felt closer to his mom when they made chocolate together. He decides after 7 years to go ashore. Of course, the place is not mentioned. He wants to find a place to sell his chocolate. Like I had mentioned before, there are several nods throughout the movie to Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka. We find out early on, very early on, that Wonka's top hat is magical, somewhat like Mary Poppins' bag. Upon arrival to this land, Wonka plans on sleeping for the night on a bench until he can sell some chocolate to pay for a place to stay. He stumbles upon a gnarly man by the name of Bleacher and his dog, who offers Wonka a place for the night at what essentially is a dry cleaner's, if you will. They do the town's laundry. Wonka is offered a one-night stay by Bleacher and his partner with no payment until the following evening, but he has to sign a contract. This has very small writing, pointed out by the young girl, but Wonka signs it anyway. We learn the young girl is an orphan by the name of Noodle, who has been living with Bleacher for her entire life. She tells Wonka that she was found in a laundry chute, and all that she has from her past is a ring on a necklace around her neck that has the letter N on it. Wonka proceeds to try and sell his chocolate in the town square to pay for the room he stayed in the previous night. This is when we are introduced to Wonka's first creation, Hover Chocolate. This is a nod to the 1971 version of fizzy lifting drinks. After about 20 minutes, this chocolate allows you to defy gravity. This is when we meet what we later find out is referred to as the chocolate cartel. We are introduced to Fickelgruber, Prodnose, and the race-swapped Slugworth. The race swapping at first made no sense other than to check that box until we reach the end of the movie, where it is explained. The chocolate cartel all tried the chocolate, and this is when they first realized that Wonka is a true threat. Everyone in the town square wanted to try this chocolate and pay Wonka for it. Unfortunately, this is viewed as breaking the law, and all of the money was taken. Noodle is also in the town square and witnessing the magic of Wonka. The officer that enforced this law felt bad and gave Wonka enough to pay for his room. Little did Wonka know that all that small print put Wonka into debt of $10,000 with Mr. Bleach and Mrs. Scrubbit. Wonka finds out that he is not alone in owning a debt when he is thrown into the basement and finds a group of people, including Abacus Church, a former accountant for Slugworth, who fell to the same misfortune as Wonka. Wonka introduces his traveling chocolate-making briefcase to Noodle and shows her how he makes his chocolate. She's never had chocolate before and falls in love with the first bite. Wonka wants another shot at selling and promoting his chocolate, so he makes a plan with Noodle to sneak out the next day. This is when we see his first invention. He makes a laundry machine with the help of the dog that allows the chores to be done by a machine. Unfortunately, when he finally sneaks out, he realizes chocolate has been stolen. This is when we are told about what is referred to as the little orange man, or the orange man with the green hair. Apparently, this man has been a nemesis of Wonka for 3 to 4 years and has been stealing his chocolate in the middle of the night. I did not like this storyline at all. The original Oompa Loompa story is that Wonka traveled to an exotic jungle in search of cocoa beans and saw how they were mistreated, rescued them from the island, and gave them all a home at the chocolate factory. So to me, this did not make any sense and didn't correlate with the story in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So since his chocolate had been stolen, he now has to make more chocolate but can only use the milk of a giraffe. This brings us to the next candy invention from Wonka. They need to distract the zookeeper, so Noodle offers him a piece of chocolate called Big Night Out. This is a nod to the gum that Violet Beauregarde chewed in the 1971 version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. If you remember, the gum that Violet Beauregarde chewed had like a 4-course meal in it. This chocolate offered all the events of a fun evening, including alcohol, dinner, drunk dialing, and passing out. Of course, this is when the chocolate cartel is very worried and enlists a police chief to enforce some subtle threats. The police chief is paid off with chocolate. Throughout the movie, we see him get addicted to it like a drug. We also find out that the cartel has a secret chocolate society under the city cathedral, which is ran by no other than Mr. Bean. Wonka is determined to catch this little orange man that is stealing his chocolate, and the trap he sets every night finally works. This is when we get this movie's version of the Oompa Loompas' origin story. Apparently, Wonka had no idea what an Oompa Loompa was, but during his 7 years searching for chocolate, there was one instance when this Oompa Loompa, who we find out is named Lofty, was put in charge by the other Oompa Loompas to protect the cocoa beans and unfortunately fell asleep on the job. Wonka stole 4 cocoa beans. Lofty was banned from the island and told to go and steal a certain amount of chocolate to bring back to the island before he could return. I did not like this version at all. I much preferred the Gene Wilder version. I did, however, appreciate that the flute used by Lofty played the same tune as the 1971 version, and the Oompa Loompa songs were kept the same. Noodle finds a chocolate shop, and Wonka and his friends from the basement opened it together. I really enjoyed this part. There were a few nods to Gene Wilder, and I appreciated that. One in particular is drinking out of a teacup and then taking a bite out of the cup. The store was magical and whimsical, but it was a rather short scene. Everything starts to go wrong when everyone that has bought and eaten the chocolate are all having strange reactions. It turns out that the chocolate and candy was poisoned. With all of the commotion from the customers, the shop catches on fire. This is when we find out that the chocolate cartel paid bleach and scrub it to poison the chocolate. Still threatened, Slugworth offers Wonka enough money to pay off all of his friends' debts in the basement, including Noodle's, if he agrees to leave town and never make chocolate again. Because he promised Noodle that he would always look out for her, he takes the money and leaves. Wonka is given a one-way ticket to the North Pole, and because Lofty is always stalking Wonka, of course he shows up on the boat. This is when the race swapping of Slugworth is explained. Upon Wonka's departure, he shakes Slugworth's hand, and Slugworth squeezes his hand so hard, leaving an impression of his ring. Wonka discovers this impression while on the boat and realizes it matches the one around Noodle's neck. Long story short, Noodle is Slugworth's niece. He was pissed his brother married some bookworm library lover, and after the brother died, not sure it was mentioned how, the brother's wife had their baby, Noodle, and the baby was sick, so she brought her to Slugworth. He promised to help the baby, but threw her down the laundry chute of Mrs. Scrubbit and told the mom the baby had died. This was a rather dark part for the movie. Not really sure I liked this part, but of course we had to circle back around, check the 2 boxes, and ensure that the race swap was explained. The money Mr. Slugworth paid Mrs. Scrubbit paid off everyone's debt, except he ended up paying Mrs. Scrubbit more to keep Noodle, because he could never have anyone know that Noodle was his relative. After the realization that there was some sort of connection between Slugworth and Noodle, Wonka flees the boat and goes to rescue Noodle. Wonka and his friends from the basement come up with an elaborate plan to prove the corruption of the chocolate cartel, which at one point backfires and almost kills Wonka and Noodle with death by chocolate, but they are saved by the little orange man. The movie wraps up with Wonka finally opening the chocolate bar he carried around for years that his mother and him made. This is when we find out where the golden ticket idea came from. His mother wrote on a golden piece of paper, "The secret to chocolate is sharing with others." This movie closes out with Wonka singing Pure Imagination and imagining what his factory would look like. Oh, and of course he hires Lofty to be his taste tester at the factory. I really don't think that this movie was necessary to be made. It's just another moneymaker, of course. I don't feel like the stories matched up very well. I do feel like Timothée Chalamet was a good casting choice for Wonka. He did resemble Wonka in the way that he looked. He sang and danced very well. I did enjoy some of the original songs, but I'm not sure this movie was needed. I hope y'all enjoyed my review today of Wonka. And as always, stay sassy. See you next time.